All right, Shabbos, say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. We are continuing Meretz Hashem in Perek Dalid in Shaar Habitachon, and the Mechaber says follows. He says, "Uperish hachel karavi." So let's remember again. We're going through the different categories. We'll call it categories. Different categories in life where a person has to have proper bitachon. So category 4 is an interesting one. What's category 4? Perish hachel karavi beinyane chovos. B'inyane chovos halavavos vayivarim sha'adam misyachid b'so'alasam v'niskam. So we'll say the fourth category, again literally translated, is comprised of chovos halavavos. What's chovos halavavos? Duties of the heart. Duties of the heart, we'll just translate literally. Duties of the heart of the limbs of a person, from which only the person himself is gains or is harmed. So let's remember again, category number 4 pretty much refers to spiritual activity that only impacts me and me alone. Now, of course, it's a little bit of a misnomer because there's no such thing as spiritual activity or any activity that only impacts me and me alone, but he's talking about from our perspective. So category 4, spiritual activity that only impacts me. He says, for example, v'zeh, gives examples of this. Katzom, fasting, tefillah, davening, sukkah, lulav, tzitzis, shmira Shabbos, v'hama'adim, keeping Shabbos yom tovim, v'himana min ha'averos, and refraining from sinning. So both say, this in this fourth category, this is all spiritual activity that is about me, right? It's about me and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. No one else is involved in my fasting. No one else is involved in my davening. Am I sitting in the sukkah? Am I taking lulav and esrog? Am I putting on tefillin, putting on tzitzis, Shabbos, Yom Tiv, and abstaining from sin? Okay. And all of the duties of the heart, again, chovos halavavos, that really don't have an impact on anyone else. V'so'alasan b'niskan miyuchados bo mibli shar b'nei adam. And ultimately, again, the benefit or the harm of these particular things is only affects me and no one else. So this is category number 4. Spiritual activity that only impacts me, doesn't impact anyone else. Okay, so we'll say, so how does bitachon, really incredible piece, how does bitachon figure into this? So listen to this. Afne Shaar Habitachon b'kulam ala Elokim yisbarach. So how does a person have bitachon in this particular area in life? Mashni mevar also. Well, it's actually very beautiful. That's very beautiful. So the Mechaber now says, I'm going to now explain ultimately again how one has bitachon in this area. And look at his introduction. He says, and I'll ask from HaKadosh Baruch Hu in His great mercy that He will help me find the truth in this particular area. I will tell you something very interesting. One of the things that you'll often find, and what's fascinating about this is, you'll find this for whatever reason, often in the Sephardic commentaries, more than Ashkenazi commentaries, where often before an explanation is offered, a person will say, Be'ezras Hashem. For example, in the Ben Ish Chai, you find this all of the time, where before the Ben Ish Chai says anything, he'll always say Be'ezras Hashem, right? Just interesting, a recognition that you need HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Again, I guess this makes sense. This is our topic, right? About bitachon and the need for HaKadosh Baruch Hu in everything in life. So even before you offer up an idea, right? To also the ability to offer up an idea, the ability to offer up an insight, the ability to offer up some type of profundity only comes ultimately again from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. An incredible idea. In any event, so the point over here is Melokim eshal lahoros osi ha'emes beracham. I ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu in His mercy to help show me the truth in this particular area. This is what it is. V'hu kimase ha'avoda v'ha'avera lo yitachnu la'adam kim bekaves shlosh dar. So this is incredible. By the way, also, one of the things that's interesting about chovos halavavos Shaar Habitachon is, if you notice, every category has subcategories, right? It's almost like you lose count, right? Again, we started out with categories, and you get into the categories of the subcategories of the categories, and this. So it's interesting. So now we're in the fourth category of bitachon. which is spiritual dynamic activity that only impacts me. He says, in order to understand where bitachon plays a role in this, he says you have to understand that ultimately, again, so kimase ha'avoda va'avera lo'itachnu la'adam kim bi'kabed shlosha dvarim. In order to engage in a mitzvah or in an avera, one requires three things. Here we go. Three things. What are the three things? Ha'echad ha'bechira b'libo maspuna. We're both saying number one is a choice you make in your heart or in your mind. In other words, before I do anything in life, and this is mitzvah or avera, step one, you have to make a choice. You have to make a choice. What's the choice? What's the choice? What do you want to do? In other words, what's the, this again, this is, he's not talking over here about making a choice between an avera and a mitzvah. He's talking about the concept of choice, right? In other words, before you do anything in life, whether it's something positive or something negative, the first thing that occurs is, I have to make a choice. What? In other words, that a choice that I want to act. Again, because I want to be clear, he's not making, one more time, he's not talking about making a choice between an avera and the mitzvah. He's talking about a choice to act. In other words, pre-actional cognition. Right? Before I do anything, there has to be a choice to act. That's number one. Number two, vasheni, hakavana vaskama vasas mashabachabo. Both is incredible. Step two is a willingness to execute on what I chose. In other words, so step one is making a choice. Step two is the decision ultimately to execute on that choice. And step three, vashlishi, sheishtada ligmor hamaisa be'ivarav hanirim v'yotzeo el geder hamaisa. Step three, Abosai, is action. Step three is action. Step three ultimately again is carrying through on the execution. So step one is a choice, right? I decide I'd like to do a mitzvah, that's a choice, or an avera for that matter. It doesn't really matter. It matters, but for our purposes over here, for illustrative purposes, it doesn't matter, right? So I make a choice, I want to do a mitzvah, right? Step two, it's not just enough to have an abstract choice. I want to execute that choice. And step three is the actual physical execution of that choice. Now I do it. I go ahead, the effort that he makes with his visible limbs to complete the act and to bring them into the realm of action. Fine. 3 steps necessary to bring about any dynamic life activity. Now, interesting. Now, we'll say, so now here's the shaila. Out of the 3 parts, out of the 3 steps, in order to bring about spiritual dynamic activity, do I control all of those parts? Or are some of those parts controlled by HaKadosh Baruch Hu? So watch this. The parts, literally is translated, the part that's not obscured or hidden from me, meaning the parts that do control, the bechira sa'avoda va'avera. So we'll say, so step number one, I control the choice. I control the choice. V'hakavana v'askama l'maisa habitacho v'hakavana v'askama l'maisa habitachon al elokim bazeh tos u'sichlos. So we'll say, what do I definitely control? I control steps 1 and 2. I control the choices I make, right? That was step number 1. And I control, ultimately, again, the mental decision to execute, right? So I control the choice, I control the willingness to execute. And I will say, his wording over here is very strong. Habitachon ala kimba ze'atavos hasichlos. And thinking that Hashem controls these things is foolishness. You hear that? I control what I choose. I control what I choose, and I control the choice to execute. Right? I will say, by the way, I just want to point out it's that nuanced difference, because sometimes it's hard to see the difference between steps 1 and 2. Step 1 is I choose to do a mitzvah. So I will say there's a lot of things I choose to do, but choice is only step 1. Then step 2 is I'm choosing to execute on that decision, right? I'm going to do something, ultimately, again, to bring that choice into reality. Those first 2 steps, says the Mechaber, God is not a part of them. Kadosh Baruch Hu is not a part of them. In other words, that's me and me alone. And to think that somehow the Ribbon Shalom is involved in either one of those steps, he says is foolishness. Ki abori yisparach hiniach b'rshuseinu bechiras avodasa v'hamruso ki Moshe kasu ubacharta b'chayim. I will say because at the end of the day, the major thing that is left in our control is whether or not to serve the Ribbon Shalom. I will say bechira, right? In other words, I will say one of the things that many of us have been struggling since we began this beautiful sacred journey of Chavos Halavavos is it sounds like God controls everything. So if God controls everything, wherein lies my bechira? Here it is. Here it is. My bechira is manifest in what I choose, the choice I make, and a willingness to execute on that choice. That's where my bechira comes in. And to think that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one who controls those things, that is false. This is the very thing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives over to me. HaKadosh Baruch Hu left in my purview the ability to make choices for myself in life. Now I will say, so what part does HaKadosh Baruch Hu control? So here's what's interesting. The part that I don't control is step 3. Right? So I will say, so step 3 is the willingness to physically execute. Ultimately on steps 1 and 2. What he did not leave in our control is executing the action to its completion, whether it be a mitzvah or an avera. Ella b'sibos shem chutz lanu mizdamnos b'ktsasa itim v'nimnaos b'ktsasam. I will say sometimes the actual physical execution, ultimately again, of my choice, right, is dependent on external factors. There are things beyond. I will say, so this is an incredible idea. We know this from life. In other words, so I control step 1, the choice that I make. I control step 2, the willingness to execute that choice. Step 3, which is actually physically carrying out. Now, I will say, do I control that step? No. Remember, because at the end of the day, remember, step 3 is not just making the effort. That's the whole chab. Step 3 is the results. Right? Is actualizing steps 1 and 2. The actualization you don't control. Even I will say, just to point out something very interesting, even the efforts, you often don't control the efforts. A person could want to go ahead and I'll give you something very simple. I will say just a simplistic example of this. Right? I want to go ahead and I want to put up my sukkah. So I go ahead, I make step 1, the choice. I choose to make a sukkah. Step 2, I'm going to execute. I make the choice to execute. Sunday morning, 9 a.m. I'm ready. Tool belt and all that I borrowed from my neighbor, right? And I was saying, and then what happens? It's pouring. Perfect example. I'm ready, right? But I'm not doing it. Again, I'm not doing it, right? At the end of the day, you don't control. That's very nice to get out of bed. Are you doing what you set out to do? Yes or no? No. That's the point, right? That's the point. Again, I will say here, yeah, of course I made the effort. Sure, very nice. I made the effort to pose. Am I putting up a sukkah? The answer is no. I will say, all he's trying to point out over here, again, let's say, I want to point out, remember, the Mechaber's goal in this is not to free us from responsibility. He's trying to help us understand the role of the Ribono Shel Olam in our lives. What are the things I fully control, and what are the things I don't control? And by the way, of course, as we saw before, I will say, just to be very clear, even in an area where you have to have bitachon, it doesn't mean you're free from responsibility. It's just a question of understanding where I have control, where I will say, isn't one of the major things in life that often we struggle with is trying to exert control in life in all the wrong areas, right? In other words, that I try to control the things I don't control, I can't control, and I fail to exert proper control in the areas that I do control. So the beauty of this construct is now I'm finally given clarity about the areas in life that I absolutely control. So steps 1 and 2, the choice. Step 2, the willingness to execute that choice. That's mine and mine alone. Okay, when we get to step number 3, the physical actualization of those results. All right, so now this is a bit more complicated. Again, look at this lashon again. Now the wording of it is very important. Kadosh Baruch Hu did not leave in our purview hashlama, the completion. Again, the effort absolutely, and the haschala, the beginning absolutely. The hashlama, the actualization and completion of it, that's not within my purview. Hashlamas hamaisa ba'avoda ba'avera. Well, it's interesting. He says both by mitzvahs and averos. Ella besibos shem chutzlan. Often the completion, actualization of some life initiative is often embedded in external circumstances outside of me. Bizdamos piktasa itim, vinimnos piktasam. Sometimes these external factors are available, and sometimes they're not. Because of time, we'll have to stop over here for today. But this is a dramatic stuff. Very, very heavy pieces. But at least I think what we're working towards, I will say, is a comprehensive theological construct about what bitachon means. Now, obviously, what we're also beginning to see is that bitachon means different things in different circles. Remember, again, this is category 4. So in the previous 3 categories, we've seen how bitachon manifests itself in each one. Now, again, in category number 4, this is stuff relating to me. I control step 1, the choice. I control step 2, the willingness to execute the choice. Step 3, which is the actual physical execution. I could control the effort, right? The haschala, but the hashlama, the completion, is often embedded in circumstances that I do not control. I know we're stopping a little bit early from today's allotment, but we'll continue on Sunday. Shkoyach.